The Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks podcast, Series 2, AI in the AECO and Beyond, is brought to you by Oculi. Oculi, bridging the intangible. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks. I'm your host, Carl Storms, here on the Technology Podcast for the curious and creative in the AECO and beyond. And I'm honored to have with us today Valentine. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Carl. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Happy to have you and happy to get through that intro. Let me tell you, as you're aware, here in this second series of the Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks, we're talking all about AI. And up to this point, we've talked about sort of general AI. We've talked about custom GPTs and how you would use that with the Revit Wizard. We talked about learning AI and the 100 days of the AI journey that I went through. I thought today it might be interesting to bring in someone like yourself who's understands AI from the developer side, using it to help improve your code, using it to make it easier for people to understand your products and what they do, and maybe get a little deeper into the weeds with what the technology is as opposed to just sort of the consumer facing side. So what do you think about spending some time with us on that topic?
Absolutely. I can try my best and bring up some fun stories with working with all these APIs, which sometimes can be challenging.
I can imagine. I've dabbled just a little bit inside of APIs and know that they can be great. Also, not so much.
Yeah. And also the fact that you're dealing with the latest technology and you always pay a cost, right? Because it's a work in progress. It's not something that has been developed and tested for years, but a work in progress. So it's really cool because you're on the latest technology there, and it's so cool. But at the same time, it's hard.
Absolutely. Now, before we get further down the road of this AI conversation about APIs and the back end, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit so everyone knows who you are and what you do and why you're so versed in this technology?
It's hard to define myself, but I would say I'm a geek. I I'm an architect. I have a background in technology, been coding since I was a kid, and started my own company a couple of years ago, where I'm the CEO nowadays. Unfortunately, I don't code as much as I used to code at the beginning, but that life, it is what it is. So I still code a little bit on the R&D portion of the company. And I'm really, really obsessed with Nutella, which is a problem, but
I don't think that's a problem at all.
it depends on how many jars you buy a week. But
True story.
so that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, you and your Nutella. I guess I'll start easy. So, with working with this, and you said that you have a background in coding, and now that you sort of are looking after your own company, you don't get as much time to do the coding. With that in mind, when you do get a little bit of time to do any coding, are you taking advantage of any of the AI plugins, like you see like Copilot and Codeium and some of those things that sort of maybe auto-complete your code or give you suggestions, or so I've seen ones where you actually chat in the coding IDE to help that. Are you taking advantage of those, and what are your thoughts on them?
Well, I feel it's really cool. We do use copilots and a couple of libraries from Visual Studio. There are so many nowadays, but it was kind of a challenge at the beginning. I was doing it myself. I just started, using just prompts, and then started like installing libraries and using Copilot, and it's really helpful. But I've had gotten mixed feelings with a couple of our developers. Sometimes I feel junior developers use it more than senior developers. And I've gotten answers like, we're facing a problem with the developer and we're coding. And I'm like, why did you just ask ChatGPT, or why do you just use Copilot? And a senior developer, when it's something really complex, they always tell me like, it takes me more time than actually using AI. And at first my thinking was, really, this guy doesn't want to implement AI. Like he's a developer, he might not want to implement it. But then when you start digging and actually trying with a problem that it's like really complex or unique, it's true. So it's just curious how you get the feeling and you start getting the feeling when you can use it. Like it's just generic code, amazing. If you need to start with a boilerplate at the beginning of a project, that's amazing. But then if you get to a really niche problem with the API where you need to find a workaround, it fails there because it will only rely on code that was already created, not on new stuff. So I think that's my take on 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 how we're implementing it and the walls that we face when using it.
That makes sense. Again, I dabble a little bit here and there, making my own little simple things using that, and I rely quite heavily on ChatGPT. I use them all: ChatGPT, Pi, Gemini, you name it. And you're right, for easy stuff like how do I set up a basic website? Tons of code, great code, easy code. But I find that when you run into a problem, and as someone that again that's very very junior when it comes to programming, I can't spot the problem, so I don't know where to tell it to fix it. And what I find is that if you say no, this doesn't work, it just keeps giving you the same answer, the same answer. It changes a few things, but it's the same. And the one small thing that I find that might help is that after the third or fourth time of getting the same answer, I finally realized, oh, this is not going to change. That if I go to a different LLM and ask it the same question with the knowledge that I know this is probably the answer it's going to give, I tend to get a little further down the rabbit hole. I don't always find the answer that I want, and inevitably what happens is I come across an answer because of all the wrong answers. So I'm still learning. And as you say, like your developer says, it may take a little bit longer. But at the end, for me, anyways, it's still a learning curve because I learn all the things not to do, which inevitably gets you to the right location. Again, the more complex, I can see it being harder than that. But that's sort of my experience.
Well, you bring something that it's really interesting regarding if you're a senior or a junior developer. If, for training purposes, I feel that it's also a tool that it's really useful because in the past you used to have to go through a, I don't know, like a video or a tutorial or like so much information and not go into the weeds of what you need. But I feel nowadays you can get exactly to the problem and learn how to solve it. So I feel it's a really cool tool for the training purposes because you can also be trying something and then experimenting more. I think in the past it was a more static way of learning. And in that sense, it's really cool. And also another thing that we have tried is something called Bedrock. I don't know if you have ever tried Bedrock. It's a solution that basically Amazon provides that allows you to run multiple LLMs at the same time. So instead of going from one website to the other, you can just say, I want this answer, and then boom, you can choose which LLMs to use. You don't need an account. It's like that's a good thing. They already have their own account. So you're using premium LLMs all together at the same time, and you only pay by the second of processing power. So when you're dealing with something that you want multiple answers, you can use Bedrock. It's a really cool tool for that.
That is very cool. Now, I have not heard of Bedrock. I did recently come across a consumer version of that where basically you could sign up and pay your $20 or $30 a month, whatever it was. And, if you paid 20, you could pick ChatGPT and Gemini. And if you paid 30, you could pick Claude and Minister, like you could pick three or four. And again, ask one question, but get three answers and choose the information you like best. So it sounds like Bedrock is kind of a more advanced version of that.
Yeah, the thing is, it's an API, and
So,
so
yes.
it works really well when you have to connect with it because then you can even compare it on the back end, and the user will always get the most efficient answer, and they don't know that a comparison is happening on the back end. So I think that's really cool. It's really powerful.
Very cool. And I guess kind of circling back to what we were talking about before and the idea of using API, using AI in your coding. And some people like it, some people don't, more complex, a little bit harder. Perhaps that's why we're starting to see models or LLMs that are trained specifically on code so that you can use those as opposed to the examples I gave earlier, which is general LLMs that could do coding as opposed to a large language model that's designed specifically to help you code, which might be a little bit different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's happening not only with coding, it's happening with everything, right? From cooking recipes to using Revit to you name it. Like I think that's the good thing about LMs, that you can customize them. But I think there's a big gap between creating your own GPT or your own assistant to creating your own model. It's two different worlds. An assistant, it's really limited and will not will not basically will pre-process the information every time. So for example, if you give the assistant a PDF, every time you make a prompt, it will reread the whole PDF. And that's a problem because first of all, it's going to take more time, and secondly, it's going to be really expensive. Like I remember we tried one time to upload it like a database, and first we tried with all the Harry Potter books, and the thing is, like, with all Harry Potter books and the OpenAI, it will charge us $1 every time we make a prompt, and that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's really, and it's also limited in terms of the amount of information you can give. So and I feel the difference is when you are actually creating your LLMs, but that's so much harder, and you need a lot of skills. It's not just a couple of clicks and then suddenly boom, you have an LLM, and you need a lot of information. It's not just about uploading a PDF. If you're doing it seriously, you need like huge amount of information on coding and how do you want to define it. So I think it's either way, it's really cool that you can use one or the other, but one, it's more challenging for sure.
Well, and I think that's a good point, and a very important distinction between uh, the consumer-based stuff that we're doing, $20 for your chat GPT versus when you're accessing the model in its raw state through the API and doing all your stuff on the back end, whether it's with an open API key or something else. And the idea that there's so many models, like, I just opened up Hugging Face, great resource for all sorts of open source AI stuff. But if you go to their models tab, they have over 700,000 different models that have been uploaded. So yeah, there's a ton of models out there, but like anything else, garbage in, garbage out. And one of the most important things about accessing these data that you're going to use in an API is that it's good data. And open source is great, but it doesn't always mean it's great stuff that's in the open source.
Oh, I think you bring a really great point. Like how to decide what's going to be your boilerplate, which model to use. And I know there is a ranking in Hugging Face and there are comments about it and everything, but there are too many. And a model might be too complex, a model might be too simple, or a model might be fed with really shitty information, really shitty data. And that's a problem because then the output is going to be not, it's going to be garbage as well. So I think it's getting interesting, to say the least. But I wanna say that for me, what it's changing all is that anybody can do it. Like even if you don't have a lot of technical skills, you can actually do it and download it and use it, at least on a basic level.
Yeah.
But you,
And that's sort of the benefit of doing that is, we're democratizing all this information. We've gone away from the Google mentality of sort of searching everything, that now we can sort of get these answers back. And I think the next big hurdle is getting past the idea that we've all kind of learned that, hey, AI does this stuff, but it can give us bad information and it's not always right, and we have to learn to check it. And so now some people are starting to realize that it may seem the first time you use one of these that I get a magical answer super quick and it knows everything. And then as you spend more time with it, you say, okay, well, it does give me great information, but I still have to spend time to tweak it. So there's still some time, there's still some effort put into it. And if you're not doing it, I don't want to say the right way, but you can do it ways where you're spending more time trying to make it easy than if you just did it from scratch.
No, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I remember now when I was on the Riga conference, I was trying to show people how to use ChatGPT for code validation, not like what Paige and Dennis are doing on a really professional level, but something really small, right? And then the problem was that it took so much time. First, it takes so much time for you to put together the APIs. It's not as simple as just downloading something. It's not. I don't know why, but it's like all of those APIs. It's something that's hard. So you first need to put that together. Then you have to configure your assistant, specifically to say something and make sure it's gonna say that specific thing and validate those specific numbers and also you need to feed it with standardized information. So then you need to make sure that all your models are named in the right way. So it's a whole process just to validate if the rooms are the right size. So that took us like an hour and a half just to validate the sizes of rooms. First, you can just do it manually, it would just take you 5 minutes. And if you have a lot of rooms, you can just use regular programming or even Dynamo, and it might just take you 5 minutes as well. So I don't know. I always think that you need to find a balance between one and the other and understand if it's going to be a return of investment on what you're doing or not, right? In terms of like, hey, how many projects I will have to work where I need to validate the room sizes and it's going to be consistent and the data is always going to be consistent as the input. And most likely the answer is going to be no. So you have to be careful about it.
Absolutely. It ends up just being another tool in your toolbox. Just like you mentioned with Dynamo and other things. There's things that they're good for and things that they're not good for, and over time you discover which are the right tools for the job, and you become more efficient because you have all these different tools to choose from, and you learn the right one for the right process. But it's always going to be a learning. You have to spend time to do that. Even with AI, it's not magical. It doesn't just work all the time right away. You have to learn how to use it just like any other tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, exactly. It's just another tool. I love that concept because people think it's just magic. It's an amazing tool, yeah, for sure. But you need to learn how to work on it. And going back to the question you made me about if we are using code, we even try to create our own model based on our standards and everything in our company, and it kind of worked. The problem is that in order to have answers for everything, we don't have enough code. You need thousands of repositories. We don't have thousands of repositories. Most companies don't have thousands of repositories. So you end up getting data sets from other people's repositories. And we're not gonna check those repositories manually. Like, no way. We just chose a couple of companies that we knew had really good standards, but then it was not perfect because our standards got mixed with the standards of another company. And I feel that's also a huge problem for me. AI, it's not the biggest problem when dealing a project on AI, but the input to the AI is the biggest problem for me. We even tried with my CTO did a really cool experiment that we brought the construction schedules and data from, I think it was almost 100 projects. And it was really interesting that even when it was like 100 projects, could you imagine having 100 projects where you have the actual schedule, the plant schedule, and all the data with the subcontractors, the materials? Like, that's a lot of data. Most projects that they don't have that centralized. We got 100 projects, and the results were not that good. We wanted to basically get the beam model from a project and create a Gantt out of it automatically. And it was approximate, really approximate. And it's 100 projects. It's We don't have centralized databases of data like that. Not even ChatGPT has that because companies they don't publish those kind of things.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and I think that sort of brings kind of the challenge of this, and we find that the value of these tools, like we said, is that for sort of generic things, for general things, for things that don't have to be perfect, They can give you some great ideas. And for creativity, they're awesome. Which on the flip side is kind of funny because the people that are really creative don't like that because, they're creative. We're sort of taking their realm. But going back to like Dennis and Paige, and we're talking about like Oculi and their Cody, the idea of being able to tell you about codes, and that has to be right because there's real ramifications if it's not. And it takes a lot of data and a lot of tests and trial and error in that back end to make sure that that is right. And this is going to start to becoming a barrier for the next things that come up in AI.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think that for a reason, who the ones who are going to make it are companies like startups doing this because they have the time and the resource to create something that is flexible enough to work with any project. If you try to do this on your own company, maybe if you're a really large company like, I don't know, the Gensler, the Acoms of the world, you might have the budget, the time, and everything, but 99.9% of the companies, they don't have the resources, time, or even the data to feed these models. So I think that's something that it's important to understand. Is like, what can I do and develop for myself or for my company, and what it's maybe worth it just to go out there and purchase it, because if I do it myself, it's going to be too expensive.
Absolutely, which I think brings to a good question for the next step here. As someone again that's worked on the coding side, that's delved into the back end of these APIs or AIs and their APIs, what do you think is the next step or the next frontier that we want to move into with this? Are we want to focusing more on how API can help you build better things on the code, just like virtual rendering for an architect, or is it more about creating tools that make it easier for people to do something? Like, I don't know if I'm phrasing this right, but is it better to focus AI on the back end in the coding and software development world, or to create things that make AI more accessible or easier to use for the masses?
I think both are happening. Like, I think it's on the back end. I don't know if you know hear about the company. It's Delbin, I think it is, that it's supposed to be the first AI software developer. That for me, it's amazing because it's not only providing code, right? But it's actually testing the code, and it's creating a structure of code. It's not just a single page, but it's creating files. And I think that's a new perspective because it adds layers and complexity of not AI just being a single plain thing, but AI dealing with processes and creating much more complex solutions. And that thing is going to apply not only for developers so they can build tools, or for regular people to build tools without the need of a software developer, a senior software developer. And it's gonna change the world of developers as well. Because like what happens in architecture, right? Like architects, they they like to design and they don't like to create drawings, right? For them, creating drawings is not adding any value to the project. On the software development side, it's kind of the same thing. When you need to be creative and develop an architecture and the strategy on how everything is going to be connected, and you need a lot of creativity for that. But then when you have already defined all that, and you have already defined what the program is going to do, you don't need any creativity anymore. You just need to code and solve small issues all the time. And that's a struggle. It's the same what the architects suffer. And I think that's going to change also. So yeah, it's kind of a mix. I'm not sure I gave you the perfect answer, but I think it's going to be kind of a mix.
I think it's pretty good. Maybe we'll take it running through AI and have them, give us the perfect answer. I think the perfect answer is 42 if I've seen Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah. I'm surprised on how many people understand that when I say 42 as an answer. So I'm really proud of you.
I do get that. I've seen the movie, but to be in complete transparency and honesty, it really got driven into me by using Simon's tools, BIM 42. is what he goes by. He's got all those different tools, like the align tool that
Yeah.
everybody loves that you add into Revit. That's how I ended up putting the two together and always understanding that. So yes, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, certainly go check out Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but also check out BIM 42 for their great Revit add-ins.
I didn't even know that he called it Beam 42 because of that. I'm just realizing that.
Yes,
Like,
it's the ultimate answer.
ah, it is really cool.
So as we're coming in near to the end of the episode, before I ask you for your hack, I guess one last thing that I'll ask you is, taking all the software development stuff aside, for you personally, what's the most fun you've had with AI in the last 12 months?
Oh, that's really hard, but I would say it's not about that much on this like really concrete solution, but it's more on the experimental side. We have been doing some R&D on one project we work on was basically how to translate movement and images of a city into sounds. So it's a really experimental project where we try to basically get a recording or many pictures from Google and translate that with AI into music and actually generate music that makes you feel you are in New York or makes you feel you are in Mexico or makes you feel. And for me, it's just so amazing when you start working on these things that are not extremely specific. That's one, and the other one that I would say is we work with a company out of New York that we're basically trying to create an ontology of a building to basically suggest a user or a designer where IoT devices should be located. So it might sound simple, but it's not because there are so many variations on the type of building, the size, the location, if it needs to be a car reader there or not, just with a BIM model, not with someone explaining like, you know what, this is a lobby and it's going to be a hospital lobby. So nobody, no, nothing. So, and for that, creating a model to basically deal with 3D on AI is a completely different monster than just dealing with 2D images and pixels. Because not only do you add a third dimension, but also the complexity and the relationship between the parts gets exponentially complicated. So for me, dealing with 3D buildings and AI, it's another topic that I feel has been really fun in the last few months.
Well, those are a couple of great answers, and I like those answers. And the idea is, the reason why I say fun, and some people are probably saying, "Well, why are you talking about fun? This is serious stuff." It absolutely is, but it leads back to my firm belief that if you have fun with what you're doing, even if it's something experimental, something to get you in there, you're learning along the way, and it leads to some wonderful things like Valentine just said here. The idea of going through this and learning these things and picking them up, and the idea of being able to take sounds or images and transforming into sounds so you feel like you're in New York or Mexico City, I think is brilliant. So more power to you. That is awesome. We'll have to stay in touch to see how those fun little experiments are progressing as time goes on.
We promise to publish the code as soon as we feel proud of it. We're geeks, so we want to publish when we feel it's perfect. But we promise we're gonna publish it in this year for sure.
So I like that. So instead of minimal viable product, it's a minimal viable proudness.
Never heard of that, but I love it and I love it. The minimal bio product and minimal bio proudest, they're never aligned. They're never ever aligned. So I love it.
No, one has to deal with people that are looking to get the dollars and cents, and one has to do with the people that have
Yeah.
pride and ownership. They're usually rarely the same thing. That is for sure.
Yeah, but you're gonna have more fun with the second one than just the regular B.
100%, 100%. And with that, we're getting near the end of our half hour time frame. So I'm going to ask you the famous question that I ask all our guests at the end is, what is your hack for this episode?
I think it's really related with fun, and it might sound simple, but when you're having fun, you get to start out of the box, start thinking out of the box, and you can start using AI in ways that nobody's doing it. So I feel that that's something that could be really amazing. Like something that we work on, for example, was ways to make multiple chats to each other until and validate the answers from one to the other until they get a scorage on an answer that it's good enough. So instead of us putting together a system, we will just allow them between one and the other to do that. And and I think the implementation it's sometimes the easiest part, but thinking on the idea of something that nobody's thinking, it's hard. So and it's a problem because you end up relying so much on AI that then it's hard to get new ideas because your brain is not used to thinking. And so it's important to have fun and 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 be relaxed to actually get new cool ideas on how to use the technology.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point. Again, having fun is a big part of this. Ideation is another huge part, and I use AI for that a lot. Although I certainly concur that if you just default to that, you're gonna miss your own creativity. But at the same time, whether you're using AI or you're just, at conferences having conversations, we've all had that moment where somebody says something that triggers your brain to think a little bit differently than you had been. And it's like, aha, I've got it, and I carry on, and all of that is kind of what we're striving for. And the final outcome of all that, having fun, ideation, getting the ideas, is that we're all kind of on that journey to solve that problem, and chasing that problem to get the solution. That's really the end goal, like you say. Once you get that solution, that's the great part, and we're excited, and yay, we did it. But we're not always as excited for once we've got that solution, for everything else that happens around that to make it something that we can share with the rest of the world when we're proud of it, as you might say.
Yeah, but I feel if you're out there listening and you want to do something, just do it. Don't think you don't have you like the skills. Or nowadays is really easy to do anything. The tools are out there. So love what you did with the 100 days AI hack. A lot of consistency. I'm not sure I would able to do something like that, but I think it's a good example to people out there that you can do it. No need to do 100 days. You only do that if you actually love the stuff. But just do it. I feel it's the best advice ever.
Absolutely, just do it. But the little extra add tidbit or extra that I would add to that is that it makes it even easier, and easier is the wrong word, but it makes it easier for you to focus and try to get that outcome if in your journey it's something that you need a solution to. So the same thing, if you're doing a tutorial online or following something online and they give you a problem to solve, you can solve it. But it's not the same as if you have a problem to solve, because then you're genuinely invested in it and you learn more and you get more out of the outcome when it comes out.
Completely agree, man. Completely agree.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Once again, we're wrapping up another episode. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this episode of Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks, where we explore the tools, technologies, and those time saving hacks that are shaping the future. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe again, somewhere down here, and stay tuned for more insights into the exciting world of AECO and technology. Until next time, keep building, innovating, and exploring the possibilities.